do. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'll pass things off to Alejandro, who's hosting the meeting. He'll give some introductions, and then we can get started. But this is a great time to spend on the topic of monitoring and evaluation, and some best practices, costs, and a useful system as well. So Alejandro, if you have anything to add or want to give some intros, I'll let you get started.
Thank you, Emily, and hi, everyone. It's quite a pleasure to be being host today in these monitoring sessions. I just want to do a couple of quick comments. For me, monitoring is a very strong part of our work right now, and certainly a big step ahead for us to improve our waterfronts work. Monitoring for me is related to evidence, of course, is related to impact, and of course, is related to the difference we can make against other projects that usually are being done in watersheds. I would say a couple of frameworks we need to really understand to set up monitoring. The first one, of course, is our shed conservation agenda, a very strong and powerful outcomes included in there that actually we as a waterfront network need to move on and fulfill with our work. And our work is basically protect watersheds and finally get results, impact results that we need to measure and we need to support with data and strong evidence. Number two is how can we really and transparently communicate our work. We are a science-based organization, so we're gonna make sure our results are, of course, delivered, and we have the support to mention that those goals are achieved. So what exactly we say needs to be related to the data we got and the results we have on the ground project. So this is where monitoring appears. In LAR, as I was saying, we are trying to do a big effort right now in how to not only new, but in existing waterfronts monitoring is happening. Data is being collected, impact is being measured. So with that introduction, just let me introduce our three presenters today. We're gonna have Greg Leisure on the first part of the session. Greg is based in New Jersey, very well known from all of us. Is the Director Monitoring and Evaluation on the Nature Conservancy with a lot of years experience. Then we're gonna have Paolo Petri, very, very well known, of course. He's based in New Hampshire and he's the Water Security Science Coordinator for Latin America. And finally, we're gonna hear some thoughts from Jorge Leon, which is based in Colombia. He's an ecologist and has been working on data management for a lot of time, and certainly is going to bring us a lot of facts and thoughts and interesting information about monitoring. So please feel free to make questions on the box, which I don't see. Where is it? Yeah, the chat box is on your up right top of your screens. Please hold your PCs on mute for all of you, please. And we're going to have rounds for 20 minutes of presentations and then some questions from the audience. But before that, and pass the floor to Craig, I would like to ask you, all of you, if there are any public and important announcement for the network that some of you would like to share. It seems like not. You can still think on that and bring it to the...
This is Daniel. I'll just say, for those of you who didn't know, we had a recent training in Lima that was a great success. And so anyone in the network who wants to hear about how that went, we have some materials we can circulate.
Thanks for that, Daniel. And yes, I can answer that. Most of us today in this call participated actively in that workshop in Lima. We have participants from several countries, from Mexico to Chile and Argentina, all water funds, but especially water funds in the design or at least close to design phase. We had more than 50 people learning about how to design a water fund, and we did actually a very strong deep dive in strategic planning for the water funds. We were very aligned with the desired state, and I think we had a lot of good questions and comments, and very interesting work by countries to really move on. I would say there was a very good participation on the online training tool as well before the workshop, as you know, is required. So it went very well. This is the third presential training event we do as Waterfront Network, and I think we are getting more traction, we are getting more interest on those workshops. And yeah, I think that was very important. Thanks, Daniel, for highlighting that. I don't know if anyone else would like to share additional news or big comments before we pass the floor to Greg. All right, so let's go for monitoring. Greg, please, the WebEx on the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alejandro. So can everybody hear me okay? And you're seeing my screen, I hope?
Yes, I can.
We are.
Okay, great. So this is Craig Lesher. My last name rhymes with pressure to make it a little more easy to pronounce and memorable, I hope. And in the last few years, the team in Africa has been working on building a top-tier monitoring evaluation system for our water fund project called the Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund. And what I'm presenting today is the learning, or some of the learning, that we've done on socioeconomic monitoring and evaluation. And I was fortunate to be at the center of this, but it was really a team effort. We have a lot of talented people working on this project, so what I'm presenting today is really on behalf of the larger team. And I hope that at the end of my talk, and I'm going to go for about 15 to 20 minutes, I promise I won't run late. By the end, I hope everybody has a better understanding of why socioeconomic monitoring matters for a water fund, what it entails, how to do it, and what it costs. In other words, I'm going to cover the why, the what, the how, and the how much. And I hope it gives you a little bit of a map so that when you're thinking about how to do socioeconomic monitoring for your water fund, it'll keep you from getting lost. But before I jump into the main topic, let me just take a few minutes to dispel a few monitoring and evaluation myths. And let me get this. So there are three common myths with monitoring and evaluation, particularly around projects. And the first one that I hear sometimes from project managers at TNC is, well, we're already doing enough. We do our donor reporting and management. We've got our financial management systems. But the reality is you can't manage what you don't measure. And monitoring your water fund socioeconomically tells you what's working and what could be improved. And it lets you adaptively manage the implementation of your activities. It gives us stronger projects. So we're not really doing enough already. Myth number two is, well, it's just too darn expensive. But in the longer term, I would argue that it's cheaper to do monitoring and evaluation than not, because it makes your project more likely to succeed. The cost of not doing monitoring evaluation, particularly for a water fund, may be the long-term credibility and relevance of the water fund. And finally, myth number three, well, it's too time-consuming, sometimes people say. And yes, it does take a lot of time up front, but it saves time. when you're starting out with your project, if you invest in developing a monitoring and evaluation system, it's going to pay dividends for the rest of that project and save you a lot of time and make the project more successful. So I think, I hope I've given you some counter arguments to these three common myths that, you know, we're already doing enough, or it's too expensive, or it's too time consuming. Let me take a moment now to tell you what is monitoring evaluation. They're almost always lumped together, but they're actually different. And this is a slide that helps show the differences between monitoring and evaluating. And you can see that the common element are outputs. You know, one, monitoring is looking at the implementation side of your project. Evaluation is looking at the impact or outcome side of your project. And of course, you need both if you're going to have a successful project. And here's a shorthand way to remember the difference between monitoring and evaluation. Monitoring looks at, are we doing things right? Evaluation looks at, are we doing the right things? So if you remember that, you'll always know the difference between monitoring and evaluation. And let me touch for a moment on just an overview of what monitoring and evaluation commonly looks like for a project. And these are the key steps that you go through. It's not comprehensive, but I've pulled out the major ones, starting with a theory of change. Then once you know what you think is going to change, you identify the output and outcome indicators. Output are monitoring indicators. Outcome are your evaluation indicators. The draft an M&E plan so that everybody's on the same page, understands what's going to be done. You collect your baseline data, analyze it, then you monitor your implementation progress during the project, and when you get to the end, you do your end line evaluation. So there's a lot in between these bullet points, but that's the rough gist of what monitoring and evaluation looks like for a project. So if you'd like to see what an M&E plan looks like, here's a link. I know you guys probably can't click on this in WebEx, but after this talk, we will circulate the presentations and you can download our monitoring and evaluation plan. By the way, this is draft number 8. So we're continuing to revise this and update this as we learn more. Usually several times a year we're updating this. So it continues to evolve, but this is the most recent edition I put up on Box. So. Okay, into the why. Here's top 5 reasons why you'd want to do monitoring and evaluation, socioeconomic rather, monitoring and evaluation for your water fund. Number 1. And these aren't in any particular order, by the way. Just number 1, it shows the benefits to people so that donors and politicians continue to support water funds. Number 2, hey, it helps you avoid failure. You know, we know that most conservation projects fail for social rather than ecological or financial reasons. So this can help you to avoid social issues that may cause failures. And the third point builds on this. It helps to ensure equity of the benefits from the water fund activities. I'm sure many of you know that one of the most common problems with working with local communities on particular activities is that the local elite capture, if you will, most of the benefits of the project. And so you get this unequal distribution of the benefits. And that means a lot of people they don't see any benefits, so they don't see the reason to support the water fund. So equity is a huge element of, certainly important for the social sustainability of a water fund. You can't do that. You can't monitor that. You can't measure that without socioeconomic monitoring evaluation. Number 4, well, you can do data-driven targeting. When you're trying to figure out which activities are most needed in your water fund, one of the great tools is having a baseline survey that can tell you where the needs are, and you can better target the resources towards those needs. finally, it helps on a wider purview, it helps to generate the evidence that we don't yet have of the benefits to local people. And this is critical for the widespread replication of water funds. Alejandro touched on this in his intro. And we have lots of anecdotal information, but we don't have a lot of hard data to say how much people benefited from a water fund. Now on to the what. So I've split out monitoring and evaluation here, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on the monitoring because you guys can read this just as easily as I can. But I do want to highlight the last point, that we have found that mobile phone polling really can give you a very economic way to monitor how your project's doing and to get word out to potential beneficiaries or people that might be interested in your activities. And I can talk more about that in the question and answers afterwards. But let me focus primarily on the evaluations because it's less self-explanatory. Some of you are going to know this, all three of these bullet points instantly, but for those who don't, let me unpack them just a little bit. So if you're doing an evaluation, the most common way to do it is before and after. And while that's fine for just a basic understanding of the project's outcomes, it really doesn't tell you much about the overall impact because sometimes you find that other factors could influence the results you're seeing, and you really don't know what would have happened had there been no water fund. And the only way you can approach understanding what would have happened without the project is by having a counterfactual, by having a control group. So if you want a rigorous design that actually measures the impact and can say not just what the contribution was of the project, but can say if you can attribute rather that impact to your water fund, you need control groups. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but the best way is with this a BACI, before-after control impact design. Household surveys, they can be complex, and particularly when it comes to randomizing them, because if it's not a randomized sample, it's not representative. And we also found that doing a multi-dimensional household survey, don't just try to measure a couple of key indicators, but a lot of different indicators. The incremental cost of adding a few questions to your survey is very low. So we measure about 10 different dimensions of human well-being because you never quite know what's going to change in your water fund, and sometimes you have some unexpected impacts. And by doing a multidimensional household survey, you can identify more of those. Finally, this is an economic term, difference and differences. This is the actual analysis you do to see whether your water fund made a difference socioeconomically. And I can talk more about difference and differences in the question and answers if somebody's curious as to what that means, or you can look it up online. Lots of stuff on that. Okay, how? So here are some of the key tips from our learning. This is by no means comprehensive. In fact, it's really just some highlights from the things that we've learned that I wanted to pass on to a wider audience. And I talked about this briefly before, but we use smartphones a lot. So we now have a single form that all of the implementation staff can use. We're just getting it out into the field, in fact, but it allows you to geotag every single beneficiary. So you can show them spatially, and it allows us to collect high-quality data quickly at the point of contact. And all of that smartphone data that's collected by the staff is fed automatically into some M&E software. We're using DHIS2. It's used by more than 100 international NGOs. It comes from the health sector, but you can customize it for any kind of project. So that's what we're using, and it gives you automated analysis and reporting. Just saves you a whole bunch of time on your data analysis once you've got it up and running. And finally, the last tip on monitoring is whenever you do your baseline household survey, that's the time to ask for people's mobile phone numbers. Once you've got that initial batch of numbers, you can ask local people to recommend other people that might want to join. And I think we've got 20,000 people now in our mobile phone database that we're sending texts to regularly. So it's really easy to scale up. And I'll talk about the cost of that in a minute. Evaluations. And the biggest challenge by far is identifying the controls and making sure that they are similar. I mean, ideally, a control should be exactly the same as the areas where you're doing the project in every way except for the project activities. But it's really hard to find perfect controls. What we did was we went to the micro watershed scale. These are, they average right around 10 square kilometers, I think actually that's the biggest. The biggest one's about 10 square kilometers. Most are a little smaller than that. So yeah, this is like 2,400 acres for those of you who work in acres. So they're pretty small. It's usually the headwaters, and we've found control and impact micro watersheds that we're comparing before the project and after the project. So that's how we address the problem of suitable controls. When you're developing your survey plan, there's some key things you've got to think about mentioned here. And you'd be crazy if you don't do electronic data collection. It's far higher quality and it's cheaper than paper. And we've used 3 different survey software. The best one by far is the one that's free, and that's the World Bank Survey Solutions. It's extraordinarily powerful. For those of you who care, you can do rosters in there, household rosters, so that's kind of nice. What we found is don't try to do your household surveys in-house. Contract it out. And there are a lot of organizations, at least we found in the countries where we work in Africa, that specialize in this. So we get multiple bids, and then they do the pre-testing, enumerator training, and the data collection. And finally, man, bad data is worse than no data because you think you know, but you really don't. So build in some money for an outside person who every single day, or actually it's every single night, goes over all of the data that was collected that day for quality checks. It'll save you a ton of headaches later, particularly if you've got a problem enumerator. Okay, so that's a little bit about some of the tips to pass on of how it's done. What's it cost? Well, for the Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund, it cost us $71,000, and that's pretty. I rounded off the numbers, but we know pretty precisely exactly what it costs. And you can see a couple of other recent surveys we've done that are in the same ballpark. So the major variable for cost is how far is it from one household to the other that you're surveying. Northern Tanzania can be 1 to 2 kilometers from one household to the next that's in your random sample. So that is what drove the costs up. But you can figure around 70 to 80,000, and you're going to be pretty safe in budgeting. On the software, well, it's free, but if you want to customize it, which you can do it yourself, but it's a lot of work and there's a lot of specialized skills. So what we do is we hire a nonprofit that specializes in customizing the software for your project. This is all they do, and it costs about $40,000 to have the M&E software customized. Mobile phone polling, here's the cost. You can see we're spending an equivalent of 2 US cents per text. And to encourage people to reply to our questions, we give them an airtime incentive. So it automatically adds 20 cents to their existing airtime credit when they reply. And there's a bunch of organizations that are doing this now all over the world. So it's not hard to find a company that can help you with your mobile phone polling. Finally, so water funds are often quite complex, and fortunately, this cartoon is never true. The more complex the project is, the more it will benefit from socioeconomic monitoring and evaluation. So, in conclusion, I hope you have now a better understanding of why you might want to do socioeconomic monitoring for your water fund, how you might do that, and a little bit and what that might entail, and also how much it might cost. So with that, let me stop and see if there are any questions. Okay, well, if no questions, then we'll hand it off to Paulo.
I have questions, Greg.
Please.
Thanks for that. Very nice. We try to do the same, mobile phone monitoring here in Colombia. We didn't success for very particular reasons. One of those were security reasons, in a country in which you are not allowed to talk to everyone all the time. But my question is, how different could be the results on a survey from the past, in which you were supposed to visit people and talk to people and see the environment and the local context, over the fact that they are just answering an online mobile question? Besides the efficiency and the speed in which you got the information, is there any risk in terms of the accuracy of the information you got from the mobile phones method?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, so we know a lot about the people we are texting, because in order for them to be a part of the polling, we ask them to complete a survey about where they're located, a lot about their land practices, their gender, their age. So we have a better sense of who they are. And even so, people sometimes will tell you what they think you want to hear. And so it's not a reliable way to gauge your impact. What it gives you is an early warning system. If you're having problems and people are unhappy with your activities, you're going to hear about it quickly. And that gives you the chance that you can adjust them as you're implementing them, instead of once you've already got a huge problem with your community. So it's, as I said, it's like a canary in a coal mine. It just gives you that early warning that, hey, there's a problem coming and you should best react to it. But you've got to do a household survey if you want to actually measure change, because then you're going to get you're going to get more reliable data. Thanks.
Thank you, Craig. Okay, so let's go to Mr. Petri, please.
All right, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, and do you see my presentation there?
We can, yeah.
Okay, all right.
But we see both screens, Paulo.
You're seeing both screens?
Yeah, the only way you can do it in PowerPoint is to show the full screen.
How in the heck do I do this now? Let's see.
Sure.
I could swear it was on full on. Let me see if I do this here.
So you don't want the presenter view.
Right, and I swapped screens so that I. How about now?
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Okay, all right. So I'm basically going to be talking about the costs related to the costs and best practices related to the implementation and operation of the hydrological, water quality, and biodiversity portion of the water funds, which is the part I'm usually involved in. And I'm just going to walk through a few essential things and then just give you an estimate of what is costing. But first, I want to make sure that we understand the whole process of the monitoring design. You know, it has to fit within a very particular model, which goes through this several steps, and each of the steps here has a particular cost to it. And we have to be aware of this in the very beginning when the project is structured and thought about, that all of these things need to be taken into account. And when is that the money has to flow in so that things get done? It's very often that, you know, we wait to think about it when it's time to implement, and then you didn't do your homework on all of the preliminary phases to make sure that you can do the implementation right. So it is super, super important to follow this procedure with this logical model. And I think one essential part that needs to be emphasized is that we have to pay very close attention to the strategic planning of the monitoring in relationship to the overall goals and objectives of the project. We need to understand what are the problems that the project is trying to solve, which steps are being taken to solve those problems, and that will then inform us what kind of indicators do we need. And those indicators, they have particular metrics, they have particular detection limits, they have particular properties that we have to obey in order to be able to know what kind of data we are obtaining, where, how, and for whom those data are being generated. And we have to define how this information will be processed and distributed, because that's a cost that's inherent to the interpretation and dissemination of that information that's being generated. And this all feeds into the design phase, which is the really heavy portion of the whole thing, to be able to have a clear implementation process down the road. And this means that you have to define your evaluation strategy, you have to define your spatial scale, you have to define your sampling needs. And you have to define the methods and procedures to collect the data and the timelines. If you don't do that, you will be starting to generate data down the road that don't have the necessary cohesion for you to be able to do the evaluation down the road. And be absolutely thorough about clearly documenting every step you're doing and why you're doing it. One of the main things that I will urge everybody to think about is put together logical diagrams of what you're trying to do, because they're very, very illustrative, they're very informative, and they're very easy for other people to understand so that you can communicate your ideas a lot better. This is an example of a logic diagram that a team from FONAC put together for Huatunhuayco approach on how they're going to do the work. They looked at establishing baseline. For that, they had very clear metrics that they wanted to use, very clear scale that they were going to use, which were the indicators they were going to use, and that would inform the next phases to evaluate all of the processes related to the restoration work they were going to do and the results of the restoration work along time. And that brings us to this diagram here, which is the monitoring and evaluation design. As Craig mentioned, you know, very often we don't do our homework quite well to look at, you know, what are the conditions for us to implement one or other design. And depending on the complexity of the design you choose, you will get what you paid for. We should not expect miracles from very basic designs if they're not set up correctly and if they're not framed in the particular correct way. And with complexity in this case comes cost. And that has to be built in the very beginning of the entire design process. You need to define the cost and budget allocations to both have the short-term budget for planning, implementation, and testing, and the long-term budget for operation and maintenance and upgrades. If that is not put into the budgets very early on in the process, guess what? You're not going to get the money down the road. We need to define very clear what are the capabilities needed. You know, define who are the people that you need to have and which expertise do they need. Define, you know, what are the needs for external contractors for the non-routine processes. Define the expertise to manage the information. And define the requirements on who and how the information will be interpreted and reported. Again, absolutely crucial that the monitoring cost for the whole process needs to be put in very early stages of the projects. Now we move into the implementation phase, and here's where things really hit the road. And you have to be very thorough about selecting the appropriate size for data sampling. You need to understand what are your needs for infrastructure that needs to be put in so that you can measure the data correctly. You need to create a very clear approach to which way you're going to collect the data, which platform you're going to use, which technology you're going to choose based on your needs. Here, sometimes there's beauty in simplicity. You don't have to do super fancy to collect the same quality data. But in some cases, you need the extra complexity to be able to get more refined information based on the signal you're looking for. And it's absolutely crucial that you have to very clearly define how you're going to record your units for all of the parameters. This has to be absolutely clear, crystal for everybody that's involved, because what you don't want is people start to misunderstand how things were measured. And it is a very good practice to hire someone or consult with someone that has experience in both installing and running monitoring equipment, because there are a lot of roadblocks that if you're not aware of them, you can run into trouble. And you have to follow these 4 steps in red. You have to do a thorough installation. You have to test your equipment. You have to calibrate your equipment, and you have to operate equipment according to the prospects. Don't invent things. Read the damn manuals. The collection and analysis of data need to be done in an efficient way so that you don't create this very convoluted analysis that people don't understand. It's very easy for us to create sort of our perspective on how we look at the data, and then it makes absolutely no sense to other people. It is extremely important to learn on how we translate this information into knowledge and how that knowledge can be used down the road. So this brings us how much this all costs. Well, here is a table of the values. And as you can see here, the investments on the different water funds that I have the information, they vary from capital investment that goes from $30,000 all the way up to $100,000, depending on what the needs and objectives were. The operational costs usually run anywhere between $18,000 to $20,000 to $50,000+, depending on who's doing and how it's being done. I can say that some of the most costly ones is when T&C staff is directly involved because of our indirect costs. And very often, if you use contractors, you can get it cheaper, but then you risk of not maintaining consistency. So you have to understand what are the plus and cons about using one strategy or another, or come up with a strategy that's a combined way that meets a midpoint between the quality you desire and the available budget. In different geographies, things cost differently. So you can see in terms of logistics, it can be as cheap as $10,000 in terms of direct operation for us to do the work, or it's expensive, close to $50,000 per year, just in logistics and analysis related to collecting samples, processing samples in labs and things like that. One of the very interesting things is that only one of the projects that we have been working with has full dedication in terms of monitoring. That's FONAC. FONAC has people that are 100% dedicated for the monitoring. In most of the other projects, there's partial dedication, and then in some it's very residual because we're largely rely on contractors or other partners that are doing the work for us or with us. So how do you go about having creative ways to split these costs? You try to design your system in a way that multiple stakeholders can benefit from it and use the information. Look for the cost-sharing opportunities with other interested parties and develop collaboration agreements with external partners. The best example we have about this is the system that was put in place in Camboriú, where Claudio was brilliant in negotiating with the civil defense and with the water company and the state extension agency to share the costs to put in place a monitoring system in which we invested a little bit in equipment, and the other partners put in the rest of the money of the equipment and all the infrastructure to acquire, operate, and manage the data. So this is a very cheap solution for us with a very robust system. The other way is build monitoring groups. One of the examples we did that was intermediated with the help of Samuel and the team in Brazil was the work we put together in Extrema in Minas Gerais, where we created a monitoring team that has several thematic groups. Now we have 5 lines of research being done that's related to monitoring. There are 9 research faculty, 12 graduate students with funding from 5 different entities, plus the research funding entities in Brazil and abroad. This all comes pretty much to no cost to us. But we managed to aggregate all of these people around this one project because we help to fund the infrastructure necessary to provide the conditions for people to work there. So sometimes we have to make this leap of faith of doing the investment. If you build, they will come. It holds true. This triggered a very interesting aspect, which was the municipality of Extrema decided they were going to create a center, which they named the International Center for Restoration of Landscape, Forest, and Environmental Services: Water, Biodiversity, Climate, Forest, and Soils. And this is super interesting because it has the backing from the municipality, it has the backing from the National Water Agency, and it created an atmosphere under which true collaboration can happen with a physical infrastructure. The other is create partnerships with research institutions in different places to work on different subjects. We have right now, within LAR, we have an agreement with the University of Sao Paulo to work on climate and hydrology. We have an agreement with the King's College of London to work on fog capture processes. We have an agreement with Jena University to work on RBs and watershed modeling. with ITT University of Cologne in Germany to do watershed monitoring and sensors development, with Embrapa Soils, with University of San Francisco in Ecuador to do freshwater ecology and botany related work to monitoring, with the Catholic University in Chile to work on hydrology, fluvial geomorphology, environmental monitoring, for so and so on. I mean, this is super important because it brings credibility to us. It brings intellectual capacity to digest all of the information that is being generated. And so Paulo and Strema specifically, the boost of data that has been generated after we got the graduate students working on their thesis there has been absolutely enormous, and it created a great example for replication in other places. And with that, I'll shut up and I'll pass the ball back to Alejandro. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paulo. Question for the audience?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a question for Paulo or Craig or both. Just trying to figure out, bear with me as I try to articulate this. Is there in a certain amount of implementation scale that is required for us to consider doing this? Or is it all of the stuff that you've described kind of downscalable to kind of even at a demonstration level scale? Or do you guys think, actually, unless there's a minimum scale of implementation or pace of implementation for you guys to want to, for you to recommend or you to want to get involved in a project?
Yeah, I can.
Want to answer, Greg?
Just from a socioeconomic perspective, yeah, you can downscale it to about 100 households. Anything less than 100 households, and you're better off using qualitative tools rather than quantitative tools. And it scales up the other way indefinitely. If you do a 1,000 household survey, which is our usual size, that's good for, you can have millions of people and have a representative survey with that sample size. So it scales up really easily, but going down anything less than 100, and you're better off doing a qualitative evaluation. Thanks.
Yeah, Daniel, from the watershed response perspective, that there is not a linear relationship. The relationship tends to be exponential mostly, and we still haven't figured out what's the minimum footprint that we require to start to see the signal of change, and so because of that, it is very hard to have an idea what is the magnitude of change that will happen that we can detect. But we have to keep measuring. So the problem is, if you don't measure, as Greg said, if you don't measure, you don't know what you got. And so we have to measure. We have to measure very early on until we start to see the signal. Because if you don't measure and you're going to wait to get the signal, then you lost the boat.
And Paulo, would you advise, I remember when I first joined 5 years ago, there was a debate between you and Higgs about measuring at the point of intervention, so at the scale at which we were working, and then at the watershed scale. And maybe that's a bit of a false binary, but if you had to choose, do you still side with the intervention, or is it, or have you kind of, do we still think at that watershed scale is worth investing in?
My preference is to do a nested design that you can do both at the same time. But that requires the proper investment.
Right.
And that has been always the pinching point where, if you go with the intervention sites, we have to have a lot of intervention sites to be able to make any inference, because there's a lot of intrinsic variability because of the small scale. And if you go bigger, you reduce the variability, but you lose, the sample size. It's a really hard choice.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Sorry, go ahead.
But again, it all depends on what you're trying to show.
Paulo, this is a question for you, but eventually more for the Brazilian folks. I see one of them are online. Does one of these great Brazilian cases for hydrological monitoring include also somewhere terrestrial biodiversity monitoring or no? I don't know,
in Rio it does.
Or even you yourself, Paulo. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, in Rio we're doing both aquatic and terrestrial biodiversity assessment. And for the terrestrial, we're using the distribution and occurrence of birds to assess the effectiveness of the restoration of the forest corridors. And it is working like a charm. We have some of the most beautiful data. Denise is in the process of summarizing all of that information now. We have done 3 rounds every 3 years. And you know, because we hired Brazilian consultants, all the reports are in Portuguese, but we're working on putting together some, summaries in English so that people can use it better. But yes, it's one of the very important things that we're trying to improve and add more components to is to evaluate the quality of the landscape after restoration is happening.
Thanks, Paulo. Any more questions for Paulo or even for Greg before we pass to Jorge? Jorge Leon, please. The room is yours.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So this is the last part of the presentation. I was asked by Emily, Alejandro, Craig, Paulo to talk a little bit about ARBIS or data management platform. I'm Jorge Leon. I'm part of the Latin America region water security team. Okay, so everything I'm going to present and talk today is available on these links. And this presentation, I guess, Emily is going to send to all of you after the call. So here you can find everything, the manual, the publications, everything I'm going to talk about today. So what is ARBIS? Well, ARBIS stands for River Basin Information System. Basically, it's a data management and information dissemination platform. It was designed for watershed management projects where multiple researchers need to collaborate at the same time. It is built using open source software and open standards, which is good for us because this is how we are customizing it beyond the capabilities it has when we first met the platform. It's a web-based service, web-based software. This means that you as a user interact with this platform using only your internet navigator, your computer, or in your tablet. This is software that was created and is maintained by the University of Jena in Germany. And the relationship between this university and TNC was started with an MOU around 1 year and a half ago, I guess. But it covers all TNC, So this is why any advance that we are doing with ARBIS in Latin America or in Africa program can be then also used and replicated in other waterfronts or other water security programs in TNC. Okay, so, well, we have choose ARBIS. ARBIS is a pretty mature software. It has more than 10 years, 12 years of software development behind it. and it has been widely applied in the world, especially in Asia and Africa. In all of these projects, it has been used as the data management platform that all the researchers have agreed to use. No, in all of these projects, all of them are integrated water management projects. Water funds are somehow like this kind of projects. So we face the same issues when trying to deal with monitoring data management, collaboration between researchers, dissemination of results, and joint collaborations between TNC and others. No, as Paulo shown to you, a very good way to move monitoring forward is to working with partners. No, but if you don't set clear the rules for data units, data sharing, data descriptions that you're going to use, no, people responsible of taking care of the data, no, the way you're going to share your data, your analysis, and your results, no, it could be a potential mess, no. So the people that work in very big projects in huge watersheds know about this, no. So this is why ARVIS is widely used in all of these projects, no, because it's a tool to solve that, no. What happens when you are working with 5 hydrologists, 2 climatologists, no, I don't know how many ecologists, 1 or 2 botanists, no, and all of them are working in the same project but in different places, all of them generating data. You want to keep track of all of that, and maybe you want to integrate one kind of data with the another, no. How are you going to do this? No, you need to have everything at least on a same place where you can really understand how it's related one thing with another, no. Okay, so why are we using this? Water funds projects usually demand and generate a lot of data, no. You need a lot of data when you are creating your portfolios, your modeling runs, no. You are creating your scenarios, no, when you are doing your stakeholders consultant process, no, you need a lot of data. Everybody wants to contribute data to their water funds to be taken into account, and then after that, you generate also reports, maps, shapefiles, rasters, no, and all of these until now have been like aging and disappearing in our box folder, on our box-based data management, no, that we have in TNC, no. External researchers usually is the same, no. They can send you their data, no, but it's up to you how you're going to organize it in a way that makes sense for you and the project, no. And the thing is that in our water funds projects, the exchange, no, what is it, the turnover rate, no, of researchers, no, is pretty high, no. So you have researchers coming, doing the research, going, or consultants installing their equipment, leaving everything working, and then going. And then again, you have new researchers, new ideas from TNC, new requirements, no? And the thing is that everybody's doing this a little bit different while it's under their responsibility, no? And after 5-year or 8-year projects like Wandu, or 12-year projects like Infonat, you may end up having a total mess of data, no? So the information, the data is there, but there is no information at all, no? So thinking about this, we decided that we needed a better way to keep everything organized and updated, and something more usable and stable than what we have until now. Another benefit of Arbis is that it is well protected against digital routing, when you lose data, because the way you store it, or the places you store it, or the equipment in which you store this data gets damaged, disappear, or are not compatible anymore with the technologies we have today. Arbis is completely like cloud-based software, so everything is always respalded there, stored and organized. And also, having all of the data is important, but being able to understand it, to read it, to relate one thing with another, if you want to explain or try to get conclusions, is the second thing you want to do. So Arbis also provide us some tools to start going in that direction, integrating things and doing analysis over things that we have monitored on the ground. So it's a little bit more than just data management. It's also a tool for data analysis. So Arbis is a data management system that is organized around a metadata engine. So what is this? For every type of data that you can imagine, it could be a document, or a report, like the report Craig showed today at the beginning of the presentation. This document has some metadata that you can describe on that. You can describe the author, the geographical area to which it is referring to, the date, the responsible organization, the software version used to analyze the data, and even maybe if you have the data stored in some kind of repository on the internet, you also have the database on which that report is based. All of this is the metadata from that report. The report is the PDF file, but all of this is the metadata around that report. With this metadata, it is possible for you to store the report in Arbis, and then use Arbis to connect this report with other things that also have their metadata described. For instance, if you're interested in the report and you want to know more about the responsible author for this, Arbis will tell you, okay, it's Craig Glacier. If you want to know more about Craig Glacier, you can use Arbis to get his contact information. Or if you don't want to contact him, but you want to know the other publications in which he is working or have contributed, you can use Arbis then to look for other publications by Craig Glacier. If you want to know who Craig Glacier collaborates with, you can also use Arbis to do this. You can see the other researchers usually associated with Craig. If what you want is the data, when Craig creates an entry in Arbis for the report, and even maybe upload the report into the Arbis cloud so you can download it directly from Arbis. You can also describe the links that can lead you to the original data. If it's something that he wants to share and you are interested in having this data, you can use Arbis also as a catalog or as a data hub to have access to this data. And so this is the power of metadata. And metadata is what Arbis uses to connect one thing to another. So the same thing applies for things like time series. Time series is a terminology that we use for anything that you measure in a periodic time step. It could be land cover. You can do a land cover map every year or every 5 years. So it's like a time series of land cover. For this time series outline cover, the metadata that you can describe is the location, the dates, the responsible, the input image that you use, the output raster that you obtain, the software version you use, who made this. No? Time series is also a precipitation series or a gauging station data. No? You can also use Arbis to store geodata. You can also use Arbis to store your information on partners and research collaborations, research members of the waterfront. So how do we use this in the waterfront context? So usually, let me see if I have the, okay. So usually when creating or designing waterfronts, you start here, no? Gathering data, trying to understand how your watershed works. What are the resources, no? What is the information available, no? So you start by trying to collect data from different agencies, no? And you can start using data from public data pools or national authorities, some researchers, some previous done TNC studies or reports, no? Imagine you want to do, I don't know, the most common study, a water balance of your watershed, no? All of the information that you gather, you decide which is the best one to use, and then you start working with that, no? This is a process that involves getting data from multiple sources and then finding a way to store everything in an organized way that makes sense for you if you are the modeler, no? And then you want to build a hydrological model and analyze the information, no? What happens when after 6 months or 1 year or maybe 2 weeks after you have done your study, a new data source appears, no? Or you receive a review comment on your studies, no? That may lead you to need to reduce something or change something, no? How can you keep track of that? How can you be sure that when you are working with consultants, they did that, no? We use Arbis to keep all of the data that is used for modeling organized, and all the relationships between this data is stored, no? So it's easy for us to keep track of the changes or to keep track of the evolution or the replacement of data, no? And basically this is about increasing our traceability in the products that we use, and also making us more flexible, no? Because trying to rebuild a hydrological model 1 year after it was firstly made by someone different than the modeler that you have today, in most of the cases implies redoing the whole work, no? And this is timely and costly, and it's not going to be the same because usually modelers do some things, no, that are never in the reports, in the final reports, no. Arbis allows us to have all of this information stored, all the process described, all the data sources linked, so it's way faster and easier to do this, no. Also, when we are working on creating the portfolios, no, the way that we work towards portfolio making is very static, no. You know, when we are creating a waterfront portfolio, we created like for year 2018, and it was so expensive and so much amount of effort, no, that you may think that this is something I only want to do like every 5 years, no, every 6 years, no. Some waterfronts did one portfolio and then stop it of doing this, no. The one in the picture, Cauca Valley waterfront, It's a portfolio from year 2010, I guess, like 8 years old, no? So if you want, in all the theory that we say that we use monitoring data to evaluate if the things that we are doing are the right ones, no? If we are going the right path, no? If you do not integrate the data that you have from monitoring with the hydrological modeling that you use to create portfolios, and if you do not do that periodically, we are doing nothing. We are not learning from anything, not updating anything, no? And the thing is that creating portfolios so far is perceived as something so demanding of time that people just forget about the idea of actually doing a continuous improvement of this, no? And most of these problems are related with the fact that sometimes creating a portfolio looks like an art of magic, no? Because the things that you connect, the assumptions that you made, no, on costs, on activities, on return on ecosystem services, then response of the ecosystems, no, are not properly documented, and it should be a deterministic process, no, because everything is based on the data that you have, no. So it's something that is suitable to be redone and improved constantly through time. But we are not doing this because so far until now we have lack of the capacity to really integrate monitoring data with a very well described, documented, and really like suitable to be replicate portfolio creating process, no? The other thing that we are not doing very well now is integrating, okay, we said we're going to do this portfolio, and let's see what we have done on the field, no? I have seen very few examples of people keeping track, water funds keeping track of, we have this portfolio, and we are doing these activities. Are we advancing toward the portfolio goal or not, no? I guess we are working on the places identified on the portfolio, but there are no reports that I have seen showing this, no? Neither measuring, okay, you said that it's important to restore 10,000 hectares of forest, no? And you have so far restored 2,000, but where are they? No, are in the places, are in the priority places? Are we working toward this? In some waterfronts, it is possible to do this, especially in waterfronts where TNC is highly involved, no? But waterfronts are departing from TNC, or it's more difficult for us to have influence on the way they make decisions, no? There is no way to know really if they are following the plan that was created, no? And sometimes it is also a technological barrier, no? They might be hiring somebody to digitalize the data on the places they work, no? But maybe is suffering from the problem I speak in the beginning, no? The consultant is storing this in a DVD, no, or a USB stick, or some kind of box chart folder with the TNC staff in charge of this, and it could be lost, no? It could be stored in the cloud, no, but impossible to find, no? So for technical purposes, it's like not having the data, no? If you can't find it, even if it's stored, it's like not having any of this, no? And finally, the other thing that we're doing con Orbis is, okay, we and our partners, like Paulo showed for the case in Brazil, no, in Sao Paulo, we are gathering a lot of data and we are collaborating with a lot of people. Okay, but everybody knows how their folder structure in their computer is like an extension of their mind, no? So everybody stores things differently and connect one thing with another different, mostly in their computers in a way that they relate things in their head, no? And if you want to go beyond only the report or the final resume of what they found, usually people only like to share with you, okay, you have the report and here is here is the data I use, no? And read the report to correlate one thing with another, no? So it's again like you have the data, but you are reduced to use only one part of that, no? And as more researchers you involve into the project, the chaos, no, grows exponentially, no? So how can you have same rules for everybody working on the same page, everybody collaborating, and everybody like making data that is useful for the others? And again, the answer to that is we need to get serious about the metadata of what we do and use that metadata to really organize things in a way that everybody is clear and really in a collaborative environment, because otherwise it's like a symphony in which everyone is playing their own partiture, no? Okay, so, and it's gone. Okay, let's see. So what have we done with Arbis so far? So we have trained 25 people from Spanish Latin American water funds, plus 2 staff in Brazil. But what I have found is that the more active users are the 2 Brazilian members from TNC, you know. And the thing is that I was thinking about that this morning, no? If you are not struggling with your monitoring data today, it means that maybe you are not getting the data from the field, or you are not looking at this, no? Because everybody that is working on really trying to do something with the monitoring data from waterfronts know that this is a lot of work to do, no? And in Latin America case, I have to say that the waterfronts that are really, in which TNC is very involved, no? The waterfronts where we are gathering good data are the ones that are really using Arbis a lot, because for them, there is a value on having a platform to keep everything organized and ready to be used and shared and analyzed, no? In other waterfronts, unfortunately, I guess that if we are not having trouble with monitoring data management, it's because maybe we are not getting any data at all, no? So also something to think about for the managers, no? We have also been working with the people from NatCap and Stanford, because NatCap, okay, they develop tools, but their tools, one barrier that they have for the tools is the replicability of the tools, no? The long life use of their tools, no? Somebody like the example I did, no? Somebody create a portfolio, but then feels like the portfolio creation process was such an effort because of data management and results and keeping all of the data sources and the replication of this, that most of these tools are used like once every 8 years, no? And this is not adaptive management, no? What that means is that we are not learning anything from the monitoring data, or we think that creating portfolios is a lot of effort with no return, which is also false, no? So what is the problem, no? We start exploring with them the possibility of coupling Arbis with their tools, so they can have a data management to make those tools run easier, no? Doing portfolio evaluations and replications easier, no? Doing hydrological modeling easier and more structured, no? And we have been also using Arbis to support the data preparation for replenishment-like projects in Latin America. Well, like I told you, no, it's not only a data management platform, it also has some capabilities for data processing. And some of the work that we used to do when designing replenishment-like projects, I don't know if you know what it is, like, well, replenishment are a kind of projects for water balancing, and the replenishment is like a term mostly associated with Coca-Cola, but it refers, in this context, I'm talking first about water footprint balancing, projects. And in this kind of projects, you need to evaluate different locations for different opportunities or potential footprinting balance capabilities, opportunities. You need to gather a lot of information to finally decide on 1 or 2 locations per partner, and you need to do some calculations on the potential return of doing one thing or another, So, and this is also something that started in Brazil with this person, with Aileen. She was the one that discovered that by using ARBIS, the process to prepare these projects can be considerably reduced, basically because of data processing capabilities. Where are we going with ARBIS right now? Okay, right now we have like 12 water funds projects which are using an ARBIS platform in an active way. And we launched like 3 or 4 weeks ago one ARBIS platform for one TNC project that is not a water fund. It's a development by design kind of project, So it's like everybody that works with hydrological modeling can see the potential of this to make their life easier, So this is why they have asked us with one team in Africa to launch a new different ARBIS for them, The thing is that so far the use of this is restricted to people that is trained in that, So we may need to think about more workshop on trainings in the future. We are using new features. We're coding new features into the core ARBIS processing capabilities. We are adding, for instance, things like the own TNC indicator for hydrological alteration indicators automated into ARBIS, so we can not only keep or monitoring data stored there from gauges, from flowing gauges, but also do analysis over this. And we are creating new modules for it, like modules to store and properly organize things like stream visual assessment surveys on the field, which is something that we do a lot in waterfronts Latin America to do like the recognition assessment,
Jorge, this is Emily. Sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to let you know that we have 5 minutes left on the call. I know that your presentation is almost up, but wanted to see if there was some time for questions.
Yes, well, this is the last slide, I guess. And finally, we are exploring with ITT, which is another partner, the development of a single solution that we can use like anywhere in the world to have telemetry service directly integrated into ARBIS, Well, why is this interesting? Because anytime you install a new sensor or you go into a new geography, and if you want to have like telemetry services, you will need at least to hire one company or service to do that, But we're trying to create a solution that is like completely integrated, working anywhere in the world. Basically, something that you just take your sensors out of the box, install it on the field, and using cellular network connection are directly connected to your ARBIS, no matter in which country project you are working on. So it's like creating a complete solution, And okay, this is the presentation on this data management platform. Please check the links I put on the second slide if you want to get to know more about this, and maybe we should think about having like some initial trainings using WebEx or something like this for those of you interested on getting your hands into a tool for better data management in your waterfront projects. Okay.
Thank you, Jorge. It was great. We have just like 3 more minutes for very quick questions before open the floor. I don't know if probably you check on the Fred's question comment about the approval and incorporation by the National Water Resource Authority in the monitoring process, especially on the installation piece of equipment on the ground. Any comments on that, Paulo?
I didn't see the question. Approval?
This is the question. I'm going to read it for you.
Yeah.
In Nairobi, data collected on water quantity and quality has to get the approval and incorporation by the National Water Resource Authority. This is important for credibility and authenticity. You did not mention this for LAR. Is this important for the data superior equipment we installed to be part of the national network and database beyond research organizations?
Yes, we're using the same protocols that are used by the National Water Agency, especially in Brazil. Our system in Extrema, for example, has part of stations that is already integrated in the national network, and then we added to that using the same protocols, the same procedures, the same standard methodologies. So it'll be very easy to get accredited. It hasn't been done yet, but the idea is exactly that, is to be able to integrate everything into the national networks, not only in Brazil, but anywhere.
Thank you. This is great. Jorge, you have 30 seconds to respond to this. This is an Emily's question. What is the time required for training and managing data on RVs? Perhaps you could discuss in terms of FTEs, part-time of staff.
Okay. Okay, what is the time required for training? 2 days. 2 days is enough for training, no? So putting this into WebEx sessions, like maybe 4 sessions of 3 hours, something like this, will do it, no? Managing RVs, I'm the manager for all of the platforms, no? And it's like very few work, no? Basically keeping everybody like logged and solve the issues that they have with data uploading, downloading, no? The greatest amount of time is some people actually uploading the data to the platforms, no? And this is something that they have to allocate, no, within their CPs, no? So far, the highest amount of time that some CP or conservation program has committed into this is like, I guess it's like 70%, 80% for one person in Brazil, Maite, no, uploading all of the monitoring data and biophysical data that they have for different waterfront projects in Brazil into their RVCs, no? Basically because Brazil has seen in this real useful opportunity to keep everything like organized and stored in a place that you can use, no? So they have dedicated one person to that, no, Maite. Let me see if I can, okay. And question, how we can learn more about the concept waterfront in each phase? Well, I think that depends. Emily, because the approach I like to take now is, okay, what we need to answer on the phase of the waterfront in which we are now? Because it's not the same if you are on waterfront that have been operating for 5-10 years than if you are in a waterfront that is just into design, no? But also, even in design stage, like at the beginning, you need to have clear your monitoring approach, no? What is what you want to look, no? And that is one part of the question. And the other question is being honest, no, with the reality of the project moment and the amount of the resources available for this. What is the best monitoring approach that we can have, no? So it changes, no? It changes based on what you can do. You always want to have the best monitoring approach you can, but you cannot say like, okay, I need 50,000, no, or 20,000, no? It's cannot like this.
We have more questions, and I guess we all have notes and conclusions of these sessions, but we need to keep on time. So please, I encourage you all to send us questions. I had a very interesting one from Samuel on the chat box, which is related to the balance between green infrastructure and water balancing watershed. I mean, there is a lot of things to say about monitoring. So please send us your comments, questions. I noted a lot, which I will share with you in terms of conclusions. But for now, I just got to say thank you to our presenters. Greg, that was great. Thank you for being with us today. Same for Paulo. As usual, very clear and very emphatic about improvement of monitoring and do it as soon as we can. And Jorge, thank you for this, cutting-edge technology for data management that we need to include in our monitoring process as well. So to all of you, thank you. Emily, thank you so much. And seriously, send us questions and comments for us to, improve the monitoring work. I'm pretty sure we all are excited about doing monitoring because we need to do monitoring right now. Any final comment, quick thought from all of you?
Just if people need additional information or want any feedbacks on particular designs or anything, you just feel free to contact me.
Thank you, Paulo. Anyone else?
This is Emily. Just want to say thank you, everyone, for your time. Thank you to the presenters and Alejandro for hosting. And I'll be sending out the recording and shared PowerPoints hopefully later today, but tomorrow, early next week at the latest.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you all. See you next webinar, WebEx, or BlueJeans, or Skype for Business, everything. Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.